support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
Hello, world. My name's Jay Katz, and welcome to Untold Radio's Down South Anomalies. This is episode 107, Mystery Fog, the New Dark Age. And is it?
I don't know, is it?
This is Asper and my wife, and we are broadcasting on Indigenous land, the land of
the Darug people.
And we want to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Well, so much has been happening in the news. It is unbelievable.
It is.
We are coming off the back since mid-November of a worldwide drone invasion, evidently.
Yes.
And that has led to a worldwide fog incursion. Can you believe that?
I kind of can.
And hearing that actually made me go back in time, Asper, to before when I was married to you, you know, a couple of years beforehand, 1989, and a book by a person that was not a ufologist, a book by a person who was actually studying, like Colin Wilson, the criminal history of mankind. Why is mankind always warring? Why does this occur? I think this gentleman had a sociology degree. He was studying to be a lawyer. He was in his mid-30s, and he set out to write this historical tome to understand what is the human condition that always pits us against each other.
Yes.
And he started to come up with some incredible anomalous reports
he did.
Throughout history. Now, that book is distinctly a revelation for both of us.
It was.
And
it's
it,
like a Bible.
My mind triggered. The moment I started to hear about these drone, UAP, UFO reports worldwide, and then the fog, it triggered to that particular book. But let's just get an image of what this beautiful land where we're living now looks like. This was filmed by our extraordinary niece, Tara, that's living with us. Let's have a little look at it. And it was a little look at us, but there was a kangaroo in there, and there's emus in there, there's wallabies. And so that's the view we look at. And now we're actually facing the street. And if we turn all these lights off, it is just beautiful bushland.
I love it.
And I believe there's lots of sightings of anomalous things throughout this bushland. So we are now in the midst of to begin our year of field research.
Yes.
And we'll report back to you here.
Absolutely.
But let me just show quickly the book that really, you know, made my mind just go, are you kidding me? And that book was called The Gods of Eden by William Bramley. And at the very end of this podcast, we will actually get Linda Bolton how to recite to you the most important chapter on this book about the Dark Ages. A fog that was seen there and a fog that was...
Don't give it away
now. Okay, I won't give it away now. But speaking about books, have you ever come across this book? Gateway Intermediate Workbook from the Monroe Institute of Applied Sciences. You know, Stanford Research Labs, they were the people that brought us the test of Uri Geller.
They did.
Helped put off numerous other luminaries, remote viewing. They were doing all that sort of stuff.
Are they doing those ones? Is that one of the questions you told me not to ask you? Sorry.
What are you giggling for? Anyway, I came across a news article this week saying that this was actually declassified by the CIA. It must have been part of the First Earth Battalion.
Right.
Do you remember them? John Ronson championed them in his TV series, Journey with Extremists.
Weren't they the guys carrying the lambs, the soldiers carrying lambs in their arms going into
battle on the front line.
What was they having souvlaki on the way
No,
in?
they weren't
Carrying their
having
lunch?
souvlaki.
Were they carrying their lunches?
It was like the olive branch.
Yeah,
that the
right.
baby lamb would be enough to
Throw
actually
it on
turn.
the spit and let's go.
Anyway, this is an incredible intermediate workshop manual.
Yeah.
And I suggest anyone with a little bit of time on their hands, it is all over the internet. You can find a PDF file.
Of it?
Have a look at it. The opening page literally states that human beings are unaware of all their extraordinary mental focus power.
Okay.
And that this is a manual to suggest that there are other abilities that human beings
that we possess that we're unaware of.
So within this declassified manual, there is a piece there that I think is probably important for our Untold Radio watchers and listeners, and it is basically how to reduce pain in any limb or part of the body.
Okay.
So what you do is you evidently stare at that part of the body, and then you shut your eyes, still holding that staring position, concentrating on where the pain is coming from. And then in your mind, not verbally, but in your mind, you start to chant like a mantra the number. And here is the magical number.
Right.
55515. Okay. You keep chanting that number, and then the pain,
while picturing
the area that the pain is coming from.
55515.
And evidently the pain subsides. And I tried it on one of my limbs that has a little touch of arthritis in it last night.
Okay.
And I swear to God, I still had that touch of arthritis after I tried it. But no, there was a moment there. I don't know whether it's distraction.
But does it tell you how long to do it for?
It says to just keep doing it till the pain subsides.
Okay, all right. Well, it can't hurt you. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter because it can't hurt. No. So trying anything when you're in pain is, especially a non-medical, a non-medication a solution, is always good to go for. Yeah.
I want to thank our moderators, especially Catherine Four Feathers, that sort of wrote a beautiful comment, because we had a few people saying, this couple seem to talk over the top of each other and their guests all the time. I want to tell you that 99% of the time, human conversation, entrampment, when it's perfectly focused,
that's right,
always has people talking over each other,
especially if you're Greek.
Yeah, well, I can phone you at your your children's home.
As soon as the phone rings, everybody comes out of the room and wants to have a conversation with you while you're on the phone.
Conversation on
Absolutely,
the phone.
while you're on the phone.
Anyway, for listeners, viewers, the beautiful Catherine, thank you. Yeah. And we will try and restrain ourselves at times. There are other times.
I'll try for 5 minutes and I just ruined it then. Anyway, let's go.
So let's think about what's happening. Are these really drones, Aspasia? Are they UAPs?
I don't know.
Are they UFOs? Are they plasmoids, which we postulated a couple of episodes ago? And I think the plasmoid theory is quite fascinating.
It's plausible.
But they are doing extraordinary things, like shutting down military bases, shutting down airports, hovering over the tarmacs of airports. They're stopping. They're going out into sequence. They're dive bombing into the water and achieving transmediumship. They are not just in New Jersey. They're all over the States, all over Europe, into China. We've had them here over military, but they're not getting the press they deserve. No. So let's just get a little taste of what's happening with the drone invasion.
Reported to be flying illegally over Gabreski Airport in Suffolk.
Completely normal.
This is dangerous for the whole country. I mean, just think about this. If we have objects in the sky that are the size of an SUV over any city, over any state, it's an invasion of our airspace.
An alarming drone incident that forced one of the U.S.'s most critical Air Force bases to close its airspace for several hours. This happened at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base over the weekend in Ohio. And just in, new air traffic control audio obtained by military news website The War Zone of the moment it happened.
Med Flight 8 Patterson Tower, use extreme caution for heavy UAS movement on the base security forces is handling the situation, and I got to keep the lights down so that security forces can see.
Ohio, now the latest of several states to report drone concerns as scrutiny over the federal response is building. This morning, lawmakers are demanding government officials do more and explain more after weeks of suspicious sightings.
You know what amazes me, and we spoke about it in our last episode with Roger rather briefly.
Yes.
And I should actually address that elephant in the room, which is the missing 17 minutes. You know, it's a bit like the Watergate tapes of our last podcast. We'll get to that in a moment. But what astounds me is the irony of all ironies. That is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Suspected since 1980 because it was part of the Foreign Technology Division. I believe it goes under numerous other titles today. For reverse engineering, or at least taking a peek at the exotic metamaterial that came from Roswell. And for that base to be closed for any time is quite astounding, because still today it would carry the heavy classified work that it was carrying all those years ago in the time of the supposed alleged Roswell incident. Now, let's just step back to last week's program. We had a program that ran for an hour and 41 minutes, and all of a sudden, at an hour and 24 minutes last week, we found our podcast just clipped, thrown to the wind, and over before it was supposed to finish.
So there was another 17 minutes for to finish.
The odd thing was, and many of our listeners and viewers said right in the juicy bit, where the Australian and New Zealand director for MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, stated that during his lecture in the States for MUFON, which was very excitedly received, and it was showing a connection between Havana syndrome and UFO disclosure since 2016-17 around patient zero in terms of Havana syndrome, and around the time we started to see a lot of this footage being declassified into the public arena for the very first time. He was stated by a colleague who has a military background and is well aware that there were two ex-NSA, the National Security Agency, members in the audience taking notes on his lecture. Now, maybe they're retired and they've taken up ufology as a retirement area of interest and entertainment. Maybe they're still, once you're in the company, do you ever leave the company? We're not sure about that.
I don't know. I've never been to one of their farewell parties.
To this point in time, we're unaware of whether it was the service provider, YouTube, that we're on, whether it was how this happened and why it happened at that point in time.
Because the whole show was uploaded. An hour and 41 minutes, all uploaded.
We have to pre-record
with an ending and everything, so it was all there, and it just was shut down as soon as he said those words. They were gone.
No, we always pre-record, but if I get a chance, and 9 times out of 10, it's either me or you will actually sit under the moniker of Asper 60, Asper Sears 60, Asper 60, and we will actually moderate the chat room. We can talk.
I've only moderated once.
Okay.
All right. I've only ever moderated once when you had to go to work to do something.
You were at sea, weren't you?
Yeah, Jay always moderates.
But I'm in there, and I was in there with others, and we're all shocked, the people watching it. It's an incredible podcast because basically it's Roger's holiday of all holidays as he travels to every UFO site and incident he can find on a journey that lasted over 5,500 kilometres, which is quite extraordinary.
It is.
And so we want to thank Roger. We want to apologise to Roger that happened. We want to apologise to our listeners and our viewers that happened.
We've got no control over it.
It was certainly out of our hands. Yeah, totally. So what we will have to do to address that elephant in the room is bring that elephant back on at some stage and discuss what we went into. I think we actually hit a very interesting point where we asked Roger about what happened to MUFON in the 90s and where have all the files gone?
Well,
and evidently MUFON now is files from 2000.
Yeah, they don't have anything earlier.
So what happened to all those
decades
of other...
They got sold.
Robert Bigelow was one of those people.
That purchased. Yeah.
Anyway,
moving on.
So The drones are one thing. The UAPs, the UFOs, it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's not decreasing. It is still occurring. These are sightings where you're seeing these things now from an SUV to the size of a school bus, right? Something else is occurring.
And some of them are in the air for like 6 hours.
And last night,
drones don't stay up there.
And last night here in Jordan Springs, just out, on the outskirts of Sydney, we actually had one of these fogs occur as well. It did not smell like the other ones, but I suggest what you do is get inside, shut the doors and shut the windows, especially if you're seeing the particulate showers that you're seeing in the States, where there seems to be lots of material hanging around in these fogs. Let's just get a little bit of background on this. And this is another worldwide sensation.
So what is this mystery fog? This fog that's mysteriously appeared all over the world simultaneously, only days before the inauguration and only a few weeks after the initial sighting of these UFOs. And we still don't know what's going on there. What is this fog that appears in the most unusual of circumstances, the middle of the day when fogs normally have already burned off? This fog with an unusual texture, this fog where when people experience it, they almost immediately develop flu-like symptoms, this fog that's described as dangerous, and this fog that smells like gunpowder, like somebody's been shooting off fireworks. What is this? When you look online, you won't find very much of an explanation. You might find smart dust, but before you Google that, let me warn you, it's not encouraging. It's a little scary. Should we be afraid?
All right, so it's crazy foggy right now. But that's not the weird part, okay? Like, number one, it's weird because as it gets later in the day, fog should lighten, dissipate, and it's really not. But the weirdest part is the taste and smell. It smells like after you set off a bunch of fireworks, and like the taste of the air is, I mean, the only word I can think of is toxic. It's super weird. And so I'm going for my walk, and it's kind of worrying me a little bit. Let me know if you guys are experiencing something like that. That's weird. Yeah, I mean, it smells not right. And I'm 41. I've been through fog. This is something different. Let me know if you guys are experiencing something like that.
Now, our fog last night did not have that smell, all that heavy particulate nature about it. But I believe today, Denmark is screaming that these fogs were occurring and they're smelling. They're very thick. People are getting sick through them. Now, you can say we're reaching a point of mass hallucination on a worldwide scale.
You can't film a hallucination. If it's a fog, it's a fog.
Did you speak over me?
Yes,
Finally, hallucination is on a global level. Yeah. There are a lot of question marks about mass hallucinations to begin with. Now it's global.
Yeah.
I mean, that just sounds absolutely preposterous.
Yeah.
So what we do here is we actually thought, well, let's have a look. And fogs have always been part of the old dark house stories, haven't they? The ghost stories, absolutely. All that sort of thing. You and I know from the entertainment industry that fog and mist are much better than smoke machines.
Absolutely.
Because the smoke machine, you won't see anything.
No.
But in a fog and a mist, there's something light there, and they can be something that can have something embedded into them. Now, when I started to look up the notion of mystery fogs, I was overwhelmed. It was Alvin Toffler's Future Shock, because mystery fogs have occurred everywhere. There was one that came out of the blue. I think it only lasted 24 hours in 1952 in London and killed 12,000 people. And to this day, they don't know what was in that fog.
12,000 people, that's a lot of people in
overnight,
24 hours.
Overnight, allegedly. And so
what do you mean,
up. Well, you've got to go back and check these things. I wasn't alive in 1952.
No, I know.
And I told you to stop questioning me.
Yeah, but did you find
let me roll forward. Yes, I did. Okay. All right, let me roll forward. I didn't want you to. I want you to just flow.
Ignore me.
So I look back and I thought, well, there's some skullduggery here occurring as well. And that led to the government use of fogs for carrying bacteria and viruses.
In 1950, the U.S. government released a mysterious substance over San Francisco without warning. Operation Sea Spray exposed nearly 800,000 citizens to unknown bacteria as part of a secret biological warfare test. People reported mysterious illnesses, and at least one death was linked to the experiment. The most disturbing part? This wasn't an isolated incident. Recently, declassified documents reveal similar tests were conducted in 239 American cities. Many of the substances used remain classified. What else were they testing on unsuspecting citizens? And are these experiments really over?
Isn't that fascinating?
Clearly they're not.
Operation Sea Spray, 1950, and that was in San Francisco.
Wow.
Now, you know, in the end, and that actually came out by a House Select subcommittee in the 70s, and it was released to the public that they'd actually been doing this a lot. And what they actually stated, what they revealed to the public as per se, is that they'd done it 268 times and they'd escalated it.
Yeah, right.
But it started off in places like San Francisco, Minneapolis, started to move throughout. Then in the 60s, they decide, well, you know, look at this. The subway system in New York is a great transport for a bioweapon. Let's spray the tunnels and see what happens there.
Wow.
And evidently, there's at least one reported death in San Francisco to it. But, you know, if you don't know that this is happening to you,
then,
how are you going to be able to document what the effects are unless you're working in a covert sort of nature? So fascinating in that sense. 268 tests.
Quite frightening that your own government, why would you worry about outside forces when your own government is doing that to its own people?
I'm not going to answer that question because I was just in the midst of a statement and you interrupted me again. So, I mean, I can understand why people write that. But you do have a very valid point there.
Absolutely.
They decided in the end they need to speed this up, right? What are the best delivery systems? Well, as we said before, the subway system. Then they thought not just the tunnels, let's do it inside the carriages. People are packed in there. Let's get to peak hour traffic areas, the traffic intersections, dump it in there. Let's maybe do it on the inside of the bus. Maybe let's do it for every Greyhound bus that was taking a trip across the states at that stage. Taxi cabs. This was out of control.
Now I feel like God just sent me this video so I can share it with y'all. Peep this.
He authorized Sidney Gottlieb to spray germs into the fog in San Francisco Harbor. The point was to try to infect 800,000 people in San Francisco with this germ just to see how many would get sick. And they thought that the germ would sit heavily in the fog and would linger in the air longer that way to infect more people. Now remember, nobody knew that this was happening. And I don't mean just nobody in San Francisco. I mean nobody. The CIA director didn't know it was happening. The president didn't know it was happening. This was Alan Dulles and Dr. Sidney Gottlieb. So what happened? They spray this poison into the air, and 11 people got identical urinary
tract infections, and one died. He was already ill, I think, with prostate cancer. But it's fascinating. The reason why I played that and repeated myself there is those two names, Alan Dulles, and the other one is Sidney Gottlieb, who we know now is one of the people that was enlisted by the Central Intelligence Agency to assist with the MK Ultra experiments, the search for the control of the human mind. And very interesting that no one else even had any information. Now, I'm not saying that is what's happening with the fog today. I'm saying through our research, and there's enough anomalous fog material out there to satisfy, but my God, of fogs for the delivery system of a bioweapon is unbelievable. And this is what made me think back to this incredible book, which was an absolute revelation. And the one and only William Bramley is. And I said before this man did not start off as a ufologist whatsoever. Wasn't interested in the subject, but going back through the most accurate text historically, he could not remove lights in the sky. Of course, they might have been calling them comets back then. But lights in the sky that were flying in formation, grouped together, and these fogs were following. One person that we know is an extraordinary researcher and didn't start off as a ufologist, but started off as a minister in the Anglican Church, happens to be Paul Wallace. And Paul's Escaping Eden series are probably some of the most important books, and Eric von Daniken has cited this man as his predecessor in many ways. So if you're not aware of these books, and you can see Paul in our podcast and in Doug Hijack's podcast, he's done past interviews for the Untold Radio Network. But Paul's books are fascinating. They're meticulously researched, and in many ways, they follow along the same lines as William Bramley's book does. So there's a great picture of Paul Wallace, and there's a great picture of William. Have a look for that book. We've got an original hard copy with a beautiful cover. I can't even find an image of that hard copy online at the moment, so it must be extremely rare. It is such a worthwhile book, and in many ways, it sort of replicates the work of the great British author Colin Wilson.
Blew my mind when I read it.
Did the criminal history. It's astounding. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to actually take you to a piece by the researcher Linda Moulton-Howe, when she's interviewing William Bramley about the chapter that resonated more to her than anything else out of that book. And it's the same chapter that resonated to us. It's about the Black Death. It's a very short period between 1346 and 1353. It was one of the worst pandemics the world has ever faced. At least a quarter of the population of planet Earth died. I'd say a third of the population of Europe passed away. 45 to 60% of that population was gone after this pandemic.
That's a good cull.
That is a good cull, and there's a bit of a clue to what we're getting at. Now, all of this is just trigger points. We're not saying that this is happening, but everything seems so coincidental, you can't help but go towards those coincidences.
Exactly.
The image on the screen for those watching on YouTube and other visual sites is just going to go to a color plate, but it's what we're listening to is where the important information lies.
So it's an audio.
Every once in a while, there is a book that grabs your mind as revelation. In my life, one such book is The Gods of Eden by William Bramley, first published in 1989. William Bramley was then 36 years old, an older student in law school at Santa Clara University in California. Between high school graduation and law school, he had gotten a Bachelor of Arts degree in sociology because he was always fascinated by the political and war dynamics of human societies. But he needed to earn a practical living for his family and worked in hotel management for 15 years. Finally, in his decision to go to law school, he also started a book about a question that had always troubled him. Why does humanity war so much? To William Bramley's great surprise, the more he read about wars as far back as Mesopotamia, he also found a reoccurring theme of strange lights and aerial objects in the sky, sometimes connected by eyewitnesses to foul-smelling mists on the ground. So finally, when his book was published, William Bramley called it The Gods of Eden, and the book flap explains why in his own words, quote, UFOs have been lurking in the shadows of history for centuries. Surprisingly, they might be a key to unraveling the human puzzle, unquote. One of his chapters has haunted me. It's entitled The Black Death. This week I talked with William Bramley to ask him about his research into the plague that killed nearly half of Europe in the mid-1300s and the link he found to the UFO phenomenon.
Yeah, that chapter to me is really the core of the book. To me, the whole book revolves around that chapter. Initially, when I started The Gods of Eden, I just thought it was an economic motive for the people who sort of get people to participate in the war. You'll have an armaments manufacturer, or you'll have a political leader, somebody who has an obvious motive for going to war. But then I started getting into the religious beliefs that trigger war. You can get people to go to war over religious beliefs, and that's really obvious today in the people who will be suicide bombers, the Islamic suicide bombers and all of that. A certain type of religious belief seems to especially trigger that, and that's these apocalyptic beliefs in the end of the world and a Messiah. And that seems to, for a lot of people, enough to get them to participate in warfare, thinking that they are part of this grand apocalyptic scenario. So then I looked at, okay, well, where did all of these apocalyptic beliefs come from? And then you trace the origin of the Christian apocalyptic belief, the Jewish beliefs, even maybe the Islamic beliefs. And they all trace down to these angels and these entities that come from the sky and instill these beliefs in certain prophets. And then these prophets go out and get everybody very excited about them. So that's when I finally hit Sitchin and some of these books about the ancient astronauts, that these could be UFOs. At that point, I thought, this is getting pretty wild. Whoever these UFOs are, they are here deliberately instilling religious beliefs that easily trigger people into going to war with each other. And I was really on the fence about that because I started reading more of the UFO literature. A very common idea is that the UFOs are more benign. They're here to help us, but the reason they stay in the background is because we're so warlike, they don't want to risk being attacked. There's a reason for them staying in the background, which is more benign. I couldn't really decide which way is it. And then I thought, okay, what I'll do is I'll start exploring these apocalyptic eras in human history, when you have a lot of disease and these strange religious movements arise, or a lot of warfare, and see, are there UFO reports from those eras? And one of the biggest apocalyptic eras was the Black Death. It started in the 14th century, where at least half of Europe's population was wiped out during a relatively short period.
Let me just clarify for listeners that the Black Death, also known as bubonic plague and pneumonic plague, was 1347 to 1350, 4 years when all of this death occurred.
Yeah, it was just an incredible apocalyptic era. So I thought, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll just go see, were there any reports of unusual aerial activity during that time? I'll never forget it. I went to the UCLA Research Library, and they had like 2 or 3 books on it. The second book I looked at, I just was stunned because this author had just gone back and collected the stories that people were reporting of unusual phenomena connected to the Black Death.
And this is Johannes Noel, and the book has a copyright date of 1926. It's entitled The Black Death, A Chronicle of the Plague.
Correct. I was flabbergasted. What people were reporting, well, they called them comets, but they were clearly not comets from the actual descriptions. These were bright flying objects, and they were said to be spraying gas. And this was a very common thing that happened from town to town, from region to region, where you have these gases being spread, and the people at that time said, well, these are the gases, well, they called them mists, actually, and that these mists were the cause of the Black Death. In many cases, they said that they came from these objects in the sky that were spraying them, and that these reports of these bright lights spraying gas started in China, and then they continued to repeat themselves in Europe. And then you also found in his book, and a couple of others that I found after that, where people would report just simply the mists. They wouldn't necessarily see the bright lights, but they would also see mists, and in a couple of occasions, the mists were kind of bluish in color. The third phenomenon, which I found very intriguing, was the Men in Black phenomena were happening at that time too, where in a number of the villages and towns, they would report that these human-like figures dressed in black would appear on the outskirts of a town, and they had these long instruments that they would kind of wave back and forth. And right after that, a plague would break out. Sometimes they reported these figures walking through a town with these long instruments, and right afterwards the plague would break out in these towns. The interesting thing is that when they were out in the fields, they called them scythes in the reports, thinking that they were mowing down the wheat or whatever grain they were growing, and that this was symbolic of the death of the people later, but they reported that the wheat or the grain never actually got cut. So I interpret that to be actually that they just had some instrument that they were waving around and spraying out whatever germ element that they were spraying out into the town.
And weren't these figures supposed to have cloaks and became the basis for what is called the figure of death in Europe, which was the cloaked figure with the scythe?
That's correct, and that's where we get that cloaked figure. It's from these figures that were appearing then with the scythes mowing people down during the Black Death.
In the very year 1347, the beginning of the Black Plague, it is also the same year that Friends of God, organized by Johann Tauler, emerged, and this is a link to the role of the Rosicrucians in Europe and in Germany specifically at this time, and that their focus was on apocalyptic events to come.
That's correct. What happened in that environment, there was a lot of this apocalyptic fear going on. People were wondering why the Catholic Church couldn't do anything about this problem, and a lot of people thought that God was ushering in the end of the world at the time. You had these rather strange, unusual organizations come up, the Friends of God being the main one that I focus on, where they had these great apocalyptic beliefs with a connection to this network of secret societies, of which the Rosicrucians were one. And this network of secret societies throughout history sort of parallels and connects to the UFO phenomenon from very early in human history up until more recently. We get all of these UFO events happening in connection with the Black Death, and meanwhile, at the same time, out of this network of these secret societies comes this new apocalyptic movement, which then eventually results in the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century.
Now, you have come up with a word that you're using for this outside influence in humanity's history. Can you explain what that word is and what your overall view is now of the relationship between a non-human intelligence in this planet?
Yeah, I use the word custodial society or custodians, meaning an extraterrestrial society that appears to have actual custody of the Earth.
And that's interesting. And Bramley actually got that notion of custodial society, looking down on the world, someone else's property.
Yeah.
That was from Charles Fort's earliest writings.
Yeah.
And that's the way that Fort saw it. But what is fascinating there is to think that the image of the Grim Reaper
that's what they were talking about.
was not solidified until that point in time of the Black Death.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily because people were seeing hooded figures with what were these sickles or these scythes, and they were spraying. There was gas coming out of them. So we're not saying that this is what's happening now, but it just seems so odd and so coincidental.
Well, a mist or a fog, has always been used in, whether it was back then or even the government in San Fran and those other, to embed some sort of a germ in there.
Yeah.
And, it dissipates that way and spreads throughout the population. So I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, when you started telling me about this mist or fog that was happening, I immediately went to, the Gods of Eden and that particular chapter.
Yeah, that's
because it just went,
it was like
God.
a trigger point.
Yeah, it was a trigger.
And I can remember reading all of that book and it being so fascinating, meticulously researched and written. But the one chapter that stood out to me
was that
chapter because it seemed to make sense. And if we look at the biblical history of humanity, there seems to be these moments of reset. Great floods occur and the population's culled back to a certain extent. I would hate to think for 1 second that was occurring now. What we're just exposing is what exists in the research literature and what we're aware of and what's triggered us.
And
everything's a possibility.
Well, if you choose to not look back on history, we're just used to say we're not going to be able to sort it out. It's history's always repeating itself.
The other
look back on things and go, that's interesting.
The other fascinating aspect, of course, Aspasia, is this notion, and Jung brought it up in his final book, which he wrote about the story of flying saucers, is that, these objects seem to appear in the sky in a way that can relate to us in the time and technological period we're in.
Yeah.
So we've gone from comets to airships to
UFOs,
to flying saucers, and now to
UAPs,
drones.
and now to drones.
Yeah. And so it's interesting too how that notion
drones
of pop
the size
culture,
of SUVs.
that pop cultural aspect as well, as pop culture, the ultimate telepath, and always predicts what's to come. And when you think of the flying saucer, I mean, was it the chicken or the egg there? We know that the first feature on the flying saucer was 1950, but it's interesting how a misinterpretation by a reporter of the time of Kenneth Arnold's sighting actually turned it into an entire industry, and people started to see what that reporter, which was not what Kenneth Arnold saw, whatsoever. Anyway, you're on Untold Radio. We'll be back with you in a minute.
Ever wondered how to fool a Bigfoot for a clear daytime video footage? Well, the answer might surprise you. Today, we're going to delve into the fascinating world of Bigfoot and reveal a step-by-step process on how to capture this elusive creature on film. Step 1. Understand Bigfoot. This might sound strange, but it's vital. Bigfoot or Sasquatch is believed to be a nocturnal creature. However, Bigfoot is also thought to be highly intelligent and curious. Use this to your advantage. Step 2. Choose the right location. Bigfoot sightings are most common in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. Dense forests with lots of cover are perfect. Remember, Bigfoot is elusive, and they prefer places where they can easily hide. Step 3. Set up your equipment. High-quality video cameras are a must. Use multiple cameras for different angles. Make sure they are all set to record in high definition, and don't forget to camouflage your equipment. Use natural materials like leaves or moss to blend them into the environment. Step 4. Use bait. This is where it gets interesting. Many Bigfoot enthusiasts swear by apples. Yes, you heard it right. Apples. Apparently, Bigfoot cannot resist them. Scatter some around your camera locations, but remember, don't make it too obvious. You're trying to fool a Bigfoot, not scare it away. Step 5. Wait. This is the hardest part. You might have to wait for days, even weeks, but don't lose hope. Keep your cameras rolling. Patience is the key here. To recap, understanding Bigfoot, choosing the right location, setting up high-quality video cameras, using bait, and having patience are the key steps to fool a Bigfoot and get a clear daytime video footage. Remember, Bigfoot is a creature of mystery and intrigue. It's believed to be smart and elusive. Use this knowledge to your advantage. Choose a location where Bigfoot is likely to roam, set up your equipment, and wait patiently. And who knows, you might just be the first to capture a clear daytime footage of Bigfoot in 2023. Good luck and happy Bigfoot hunting!
Well, I think we're going to have to use a few of those pointers when we go out into the book here at Jordan Springs. You are on Untold Radio. Well, you are on Untold Radio. Excuse me. It's late at night. We're trying to get this done. You're yawning. It's the new cheeky thing. Now, it's one thing about this fog, these UAPs, and, what sort of delivery system we're looking at. I just say if that fog seems anything like suspect, smells a little odd,
I get out of
the material in the air, go inside, shut the windows,
absolutely.
and put some sort of filter on, throw the aircon on if you've got one of those stupid things. Anyway, Miss Aspasia, the Jetsons may be coming for real.
You think?
Yeah, because now they're talking
They're
about
running a little bit
the
like
ultimate electric aircraft car. that is an Uber, that will become an Uber in the future. And they
Yeah,
reckon
yeah.
that this one will be out publicly by the end of 2030. So this is what it's going to look at. Evidently, it's called the Invo Moon, and it's got speeds up to 250 miles an hour. It can give you a 360 panoramic view. It is near silent, and it will retail for £280,000.
I can't afford it.
Leo Kahler is
Kaylee,
an ex-Tesla engineer,
Mm.
and he was inspired to create this craft by drawings by Leonardo da Vinci.
Mm.
It's yet to be certified by the US Aviation Authority,
Mm.
and they were saying there that it'll be launched into major cities by 2030.
But I'm looking at this, so that's it there, right?
Yeah, that's it in traffic.
What's its propulsion? Do we know? What's its
It's
propulsion?
electric, so I've got no
Electric
idea.
what?
A hovercraft? What is it?
What's-
I mean, it's some new form of anti-gravitic propulsion that we're hearing about, that we heard in the man that blew up the Tesla and the Trump Towers there. I mean, what was that? He was talking about anti-gravitic drones
I don't know.
in his final statements.
Do we know how
According to
big
his
is
life.
that? That looks pretty. Is that's supposed
That's
to be
just
like
a
a car?
drawing based off.
Okay.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a car.
Yeah.
So, you know what?
Is there a test one out there? Have they done tests?
Well,
and
in
stuff?
the 50s, they did do tests. So let me show you a few tests from, 70-something years ago and see what you think of this one.
The ground effect program also includes 2 off-the-shelf Curtiss-Wright air cars. This one seats 4 or has a payload capacity of 1,000 pounds. Simple controls permit the operator to maneuver the vehicle in any direction by controlling airflow through adjustable vanes. 2 180 horsepower aircraft engines power the ducted propellers for speeds up to 35 miles per hour with an operating range of 2 hours. Air performs the important functions of propulsion, suspension, and braking. The machine is capable of turning on its own axis. The normal lift for the air car is approximately 6 to 9 inches above the ground. Since ground effect machines move on a cushion of air, they can travel over any unobstructed terrain, water, mud, swamp, ice, or snow. With this research program, the Army truly takes a step into a new field which may offer improved surface mobility.
Well, that ain't going to stop with road congestion,
6
is it?
to 9 inches off the ground.
It's a bit like the Avro car that came out
It is
of
the
Canada
Avro.
at
That's
that
a
time.
hovercraft.
It's a
That's a hovercraft. That's not a.
Now, that was the model
Mm.
2500,
Mhm.
and they said that was the machine that whispered between Earth and the sky.
No.
It didn't even get to have a hint there, did it really? Let's just see how effective this thing may be.
Now we're getting into still another category of Army vehicles. It looks like the driver of this one got too close to the water. He seems to be stuck in the sand. Well, there's a dandy solution to the beach parking problem. This early model air car has no wheels. It hovers on a cushion of air, generated under it by 2 aircraft engines driving ducted propellers in the hood and trunk. Skimming over land or water with equal ease, the experimental air car can develop speeds up to 60 miles an hour. It can travel over any unobstructed surface at an altitude of 6 to 9 inches. Maneuvering is accomplished by opening ports, which divert the airflow through adjustable vanes. In this way, air performs the functions of propulsion, braking, and steering, as well as suspension. The air car is capable of turning on its own axis and can carry a payload of 1,000 pounds. It seats 4 men who ride into a new realm of combat mobility aboard this vehicle.
And then they
So it
don't.
did, and then
They
and
don't.
nothing happened with it.
No, I don't think
So
anything happened with it.
if they'd have gone with that and developed it, who knows where it'd be now? Because what year was that?
That was in the 50s.
50s. Okay. But they didn't. And obviously it wasn't a feasible thing, was it?
I think
Obviously
they
not.
were really difficult. With the Avro car, it was really difficult to actually control. They had to put a skirt around it, like they've got a skirt
To
around
keep
it. They look like an old Plymouth, don't they?
It did.
It certainly isn't the Jetsons. No, it's not the hoverboard. I think we really still have
Even
to wait
though I'm
for those things.
I'm reading Alvin Toffler's Future Shock at the moment.
Rereading it,
Yeah, I'm still not thinking that we're going to get to the Jetsons flying car era in our lifetime.
Now, look, I couldn't, I don't think so either.
Which is sad. I'm really sad about that because I was looking forward to that. In the 1990s, I was thinking, we're getting close to 2000. It's all gonna hit.
You do know that the Jetsons is a fantasy cartoon, though.
Totally. Of course, I know that. I know that, but we were being sold that.
Yeah.
But then I looked at old.
Hey, we've got some Jetsons on 16.
We do have one, yeah. Then I looked at I don't know, what was it, 1960s? What was that expo that they had?
The World's Fair.
The World's Fair, and you know what they were selling us then? Call waiting. That's what they were selling us. Call waiting. That was the big thing.
Still,
you know what I mean?
Times, call waiting.
But I mean, even well, you can get rid of it. But the call waiting.
It's all about expedience, isn't it?
It is. But even from the call waiting to where we are now, you can see the future shock now. It's like we are future shock because in the 60s it was call waiting. Now in 2025, which is 60 years later, we've got these phones that
become the third limb.
But they do everything. They're amazing what they do. The only problem is that they are a drug to people. People are so reliant on
and also
it's an extension of their
when
hand.
the inversion occurring, 50, 60, 70, 80% of the material now, whether it's real
that's
or
the
not.
problem.
And
That is the
here's
problem.
a challenge in deciphering all this great drone footage, of which there is astounding,
absolutely
amazing drone footage.
What's real and what's not.
What's real or not? What's been created by AI? What is part of a nanobot? Where's the clickbait? The only thing I can tell from our podcast here, Aspacera, is we have not got any nanobots because we haven't got the clicks happening for the bait.
We've got nothing.
We've got nothing. Now, a plethora, a tsunami, an absolute, flattening of me occurred when I looked into mysterious fogs.
Yeah.
They've been occurring since the dawn of mankind. Here's a fascinating one out of Ireland in the 70s. I think this could possibly be real, but what is happening here?
On October 9th, 1976, a small town in Ireland had an unusual fog swept at around 7 p.m. Many people were scared and locked up in house. The fog left by the morning time. There, over 60 reported sightings of the undead that night. Police believed most of them were pranks. But strangely, police found the local graveyard had all the graves dug up. This is still a huge mystery in all of the Europe.
And you know what? Not just all the graves dug up, but from the news reports I looked at, all the bodies were missing from the graves.
Wow.
So if that is a hoax, that's a lot of work. You're going to have a lot of people.
That's a criminal offence hoax.
It's a massive
That's
criminal
huge.
offence.
You're not allowed to tamper with dead bodies. You're not allowed to dig up graves. You've got to get a court order to dig up one, and you've got to have a really good reason why you want to dig up a grave.
And you've got to be careful what you wish for. Us here in the paranormal, supernatural, anomalous world, sometimes we're wishing for the truth to be revealed. We know that something out there is occurring that we haven't been informed correctly about us or outside of human comprehension.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the last thing I want is for George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead.
Dawn of the
Dead. We're in the supermarket getting our groceries.
There goes my shopping centre.
And there it goes that is real.
No, don't
Can
want
you
that
believe
to happen.
that?
Yeah, no.
So I reckon if you're curious about that, do a bit more research. I'm going to do a bit more on that Irish case. Fascinating. The fog comes along. The people that were inside were fine.
And it's the walking dead.
Sensible. The ones that went out for a peek, they were seeing friends and relatives pass them by.
Yeah, right.
And in the morning, realizing, What is going on? What sort of world are we living in?
We are living in such a mysterious world, and I hate that science always reduces it down to this really prosaic. Everything's prosaic. Everything's got a plausible explanation, and it doesn't all the time.
Not all the time.
And the ones that don't, they seem to sweep under the carpet or dismiss because they can't. They can't answer them, so they just go, "Oh, well, we won't worry about that one," because we can't answer it. But it's like you have to answer it. You've got to answer everything. If you're telling me science is the be-all and end-all.
You can't answer everything when there isn't an answer.
Yeah, but they say that there is an answer for everything. Science, that's the way science works. There's an answer for everything, and they can work it out, but they can't. Not all the time.
Well,
and you only have to not be able to work it out just one time for that thing. We only have to have one UFO case to be real, just one.
Travis Walton.
For it, well, just one case out of the hundreds of thousands, the millions of cases that have been reported all over the world in, say, since the 1950s,
by
right?
credentialed eyewitnesses.
We only need one case to be real, and it's a real phenomenon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, yeah.
But I don't need that credentialed eyewitness either. I'm happy to listen to everyone's personal reports and whether you were imbibing at the time or not. I'm sure there's genuine encounters that have occurred during that. And as Terence McKenna said, the late great Terence McKenna, I didn't see aliens till I took DMT.
Yeah.
But then he saw them consistently with other people. Now, was that another bleed over mass hallucination?
It was a mass hallucination.
So are we either Don Quixote, perpetually, futilely, always tilting at windmills, or are we onto the right stuff?
I don't know. I'm happy to just keep researching it. I mean, the researching, the search, the reading, the gathering of knowledge, and putting it together.
The meeting of people.
Finding
a community out there.
But finding, incidents that, resonate with you, and you kind of go, oh, that sounds, that's, I can feel that in my waters, that there's something to that. Or it's like, I'm not going to, that doesn't sound right to me. Do you know what I mean? And so that search is,
and I think
it's the great thing.
It's different for everyone.
Absolutely.
It's a personal thing.
Yep.
And it's a perceptual thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a borders thing and
all kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's
anyway, look, thank you so much for being patient with us.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that hasn't scared the hell out of you. But just take care. You know, who knows what's going on.
Best to be informed, I think.
It is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think at the end of the day, we are experiencing an incredible amount of sightings on a level we may never have experienced before, at least in the documented history of humanity.
Absolutely.
And these odd things are occurring around us. So I think it's time to sit on the edge of your seat, keep an eye on the sky, keeping a gas mask in the back closet, and just be prepared for whatever that occurs.
That's right.
And you know what? One way to get through it is to have extraordinary compassion and love for the people that treat you correctly.
And get a community around you.
Yeah. And that's what we've got. We've got the love aspect
We do.
between us and between the people.
We'll be back next week.